Good morning to all of you. I'm Karen Hill Scott. There's a bio in the binder, I believe, that describes me, but I'm going to describe another person because this morning I'm an experiment in my own education. I've come here from Los Angeles, California. My luggage was lost. We were late getting here. My hairdryer broke at 4 o'clock this morning. It's been quite an experience, and I'm the first speaker. And so by my mistake, all ye below me shall learn. So I hope to make the best of this. I'm very, very honored to be here. Bilbao looks like such a beautiful, beautiful city. And I think this TEDx idea of working locally is really the way to bring about change, to bring about global change, because through multiple experiments going on in communities all over the world will learn from each other. Today, I'm going to talk about education reform from 2010 forward. And as I said, you have a bio, but there's another me, and that's a person who's worked 20 years in community development and in educational systems design. I had 1,000 stories to tell that I tried to organize into about 100 themes, and I tried to break those themes down into big ideas, and I still wasn't down to 18 minutes. So suffice it to say, what I'm going to do today is make 7 declarations about welfare reform, because I got to that point where you really have to distill to your 7 most important points. And I hope in the 13, 14, 15 minutes I have left, I'm able to cover them all adequately. First, we have to see if this works. How close do I need to be? Okay, here we go. Here's my first slide. Okay, I'll go over here. My first declaration is that we really do know what our problem is in education reform. There's really nothing new to be known. There are new things to try and new things to do. Just like this little boy here who is quite alert as to what the problems are, we have studied over many, many years, and we know exactly what our mission is in education. Overall, worldwide, we have to catch up, and while we're catching up, we have to keep up. We've got to keep up with technology and science and prepare for tomorrow. The catching up part is probably the very hardest part because so many of the world's children are behind. They're way behind in both the developed world and in the developing world. They're behind in almost every subject. There are a few nations of the world that are doing well. Finland is #1, Korea, for example, as examples. But by and large, even large countries like the United States are sliding behind. And the United States, for example, has got 42 million children who are behind in fundamental reading and math. This just shows you the scope and nature of the problem. Now, one thing we also know is that children really do love to learn. There's no reason for any child to be failing in school. We are the only species that are born really hardwired to learn and perform and to expand our thinking and to be able to visualize possibilities without something concrete in front of us. Knowing this lets you know that the failure that is happening all around us with young children is not due to the children. It's due to the institutions that serve them and perhaps the ways in which they are being socialized. This is the second declaration. The third declaration, I'm so sorry about this, gives me a sense of distance. We know that children want to learn. Our third declaration is that we also know what to do with children. They should not be hanging around like that, very idle. Their minds need a lot of stimulation. They need a lot of encouragement. And they need to be doing work. And we have programs that show, even with children who are at great disadvantage, this graph here shows a program that I'm familiar with in the United States, where you can see over 4 years of the program, not only are children doing better, but the teachers are getting better at working with the children in fundamental areas such as reading and math. We need help in many, many areas, but not only do we know that children want to learn and can learn, we can we have discovered ways by which we can catch up with large-scale experiments that are going on in different places around the world. So if we have all this knowledge that's going to get us there, what is our problem? And where we have a big problem is with what I call willful ignorance. Everyone thinks the reason we can't get ahead in education is because of money. We don't have buildings. We don't have the right plan. We have so much talent, so many wonderful people working in education, but we also have tremendous opposition within education and without to making advances and investments in learning. And a lot of this is fueled, I feel, by willful ignorance. Now, I have to admit, I feel this way because in the United States right now there seems to be an epidemic of willful ignorance, and that may be due to the fact that people are falling behind with cognitive output. If you know less, you are somewhat ignorant, you have an interest, I suppose, in being very determined about it. But willful ignorance is a refusal to accept the facts that are in front of your face, or a decision to stick with the plan or the ideology that you have simply because you want to. You don't want to change. It's too uncomfortable. There's a potential for great loss if you have to change. It is a horrible problem. So we have issues where people in communities, parents even, will not approve funding that will expand programs in schools. We have people who put their heads in the sand and say, I'm not in school anymore, I'm not going to worry about it. And then we have people, I call these the blaming barbers up here, who the unions and the teachers and all these different groups who are working within education are blaming each other for the problems that are taking place. And in fact, the greatest irony of education reform and willful ignorance is that there are a lot of people behaving ignorantly within education about what to do next. So my next concern is there something that we can do about it? And I'm giving you an example here because this is a metaphor for willful ignorance that I think that you might be able to remember. I talked to a psychiatrist about this, and he said willful ignorance really has no genetic origin. Willful ignorance is brought about by socialization. And I thought, oh, well, I've studied Freudian psychology. Let's go back to toilet training. That's probably the first place where a child shows their willfulness and often their ignorance, because it's a lot easier to go to the bathroom once you figure it out than it is to persist in walking around with a wet diaper. However, about 25 years ago, and maybe this is the reason we've had an achievement slide, disposable diapers were invented. Now, disposable diapers are wonderful. I've used them. I have 4 children. How many of you use Huggies or some other brand of disposable diaper? The biggest shock to me about disposable diapers and toilet training is the diaper does not get wet. The child is never uncomfortable. So why go to the toilet? It's always warm, it's always dry, it's always comfortable. I've even wet some for you today. You can pass them around and play with them because they don't smell, but you can see for yourself. Anybody want to take one, pass it around? That they're dry to the touch, and they do even better. They wick even better, they wick even better with the warmth of the child's body because the diaper's got this little gel in it. I dissected one the other day like a frog after putting a lot of water in it. And so this young man, who really didn't want to pose for this, but I told him his face wouldn't show and it wouldn't be on the internet for all to see, and he kept his underwear on with it, for example. He has on a regular Huggy there to begin with. And he's one of those young boys. That's quite a challenge, I want to say that. Also, boys tend to like to not get trained more so than girls who tend to want to be appropriate. But we do have a problem. I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but there are children entering kindergarten, which is the first year of school in the United States, who wear pull-ups because they're too busy and preoccupied to go to the bathroom, and it's quite all right to be kept dry. And for me, someone who's raised 4 children, this just seems so absolutely outlandish, but it definitely goes to the point that there are just no consequences, and as long as you're comfortable, you can stick with your same old way of doing things, no matter how many landfills you and your mother are polluting. So I wet a diaper. This diaper has 1.7 liters of water in it. It managed to still be dry to the touch. And the only reason a child like this would give up that diaper and go to the bathroom, does anybody have any idea why? It is heavy, and it's so wide, you can't walk. You got to go like this. It's an impediment. It's a true mechanical impediment. My suggestion to anyone who has a child that doesn't want to give up the diaper, let it get full. He won't be wet, he won't be uncomfortable, but he will be deterred from doing the things he would love to do. Well, this is the same phenomena that goes on in the mind of the willfully ignorant person. If I don't have to change, I won't. I'll just hang in here till I'm so uncomfortable I've got to take to another plan. So keep this in mind, because really and truly the biggest obstacle to education reform is coming from within the industry, the sector itself. And, of course, the politicians who fund it. So here are the plaintive pleas of our children. Please help. And so my declaration number, what am I on now, 6, is to get out there and help, because there is a need for creative, brilliant, exciting people to help steward many of the experiments that are going on, to help get funding to replicate experiments that are going on. You're going to hear about at least 2 that I know of, demonstration kinds of programs that are in some stage of development that are very, very promising for advancing the production of knowledge and creativity in this world. And the more involvement we have, and as I said, at a local level, I've been doing this for a long time. I've done master plans for many, many communities around America. It's what happens on the ground that people can see that makes them believe again in the promise of education for their children. So we have to have these ideas. Sometimes children have them. According to the Organization of Economic and Cooperative Development, they held a global poll of children and parents. Over 92 countries responded. And what they wanted most was learning, not regurgitation. They wanted knowledge that lasts. They wanted to learn to think critically rather than be able to test well. So children have a pretty good idea about what ought to be going on in their educational institutions. And I think for all of us in this room, we should take heed and pay attention to that as we embark on going forward with our reform efforts. It takes, and this is my 7th declaration, dedicate a decade to whatever you choose to do, because it takes about a decade to see robust results that can be replicated and that can withstand the scrutiny of both researchers and policymakers. If this is going to be a merit good, a public good for all children, all of us who are here, if you are going to take a serious role in leadership, especially around education reform, it definitely does take a decade. Jeffrey Canada, who's very famous in Harlem for creating an innovative model called the place-based strategy, says he came in and thought 2 years he'd have it all taken care of. Little did he know, he's been there 20 years, but almost 10 years doing education, that it took a decade for him to get where he is today. Those results I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, that person who has been running that program in Maryland has been at it for 10 years. And as you saw, not only did the children get better, but as the decade passes, the professionals who deliver it get better, and they can begin to train more people. So our catching up and moving forward at the same time is going to involve that kind of assiduous, sustained work. And we know from the models that we've seen that it takes not 1 year of paying attention to children. I'm an advocate of a continuous learning system from age 3 through 8 as the foundational years, and then seriously paying attention to children every single year thereafter. There is no rest in this process called education, because children require that kind of nurturing to get ahead, and they need it over the long period of time. So devote a decade if you can, and you will get results that look something like this. Happy children, children who know how to play and can play, and children who know how to produce, and produce because they want to. And last but not least, what do we do with the willfully ignorant when the last man standing among the willfully ignorant has the nerve to be sitting on the railroad tracks because he doesn't believe a train will come and get him? All the others have finally, at this point, joined the effort to reform education worldwide, and he is left there. Should he be forgiven? Should you help him? Ken, is there anything that you could do for him? My suggestion is walk up to him and tell him, why don't you go home and change that soggy diaper? Thank you.